I'd like to introduce you to Mary Blair. Mary Blair was a famous artist and illustrator. When Mary was just starting out as a young artist, it was very hard for women to find jobs working for big companies. Most of the companies only wanted to hire men, which was not very fair. Finally, Mary caught the eye of someone very famous, Walt Disney. He loved her bright, colorful illustrations and wanted her to come work for his company. Here she is in her studio. Mary Blair was one of the first women ever to work for Disney. She helped design the storyboards for some classic Disney movies. Let's take a look at some of her art and see if you can recognize some of the movies that she helped create. Do you recognize this one? How about this one? And this one? These are all movies that Mary Blair helped create. In addition to helping create movies, Mary also loved to create paintings of castles. Her castles are so charming and fun with their bright, exciting colors and flat shapes. Mary used so many shapes to create her castles, and she used her creative imagination to make each one even more beautiful than the next. We are going to create some shape castles today, inspired by the castles of Mary Blair. Let's get started. Welcome to day one of our Mary Blair inspired castles. First, we need to draw and color some shapes. Mary Blair's castles were created using a variety of shapes, but we're going to start out with only a few shapes: squares, circles, and rectangles. The reason we're only starting out with these shapes is because we can actually use these shapes to create lots of other shapes later on. Draw as many as you can fit on your paper. Make sure that they are close together so that you can fit more shapes on your paper. The shapes are our building blocks, and the more blocks you have, the better your castle will be. I also want you to notice the size of my shapes. They are not teeny tiny and they are not enormous. They are medium-sized. Teeny tiny shapes are going to be tricky to cut out. And if you draw extra large shapes, you might only end up with 3 or 4, and that's not enough to build a castle. So stick to medium-sized shapes. I would say they should be about as thick as 3 or 4 fingers. Mary Blair's castles are super bright and colorful, so after you draw your shapes, color them. You can use crayons or markers to color them. Welcome back to Mary Blair Castles Day 2. After coloring, the next step is to cut the shapes out. You're going to cut carefully and slowly and try to stay on the line. Just do the best that you can. After you cut all your shapes out, the next thing to do is to get a second piece of paper, and we want to try to start building the castle up. Now you can hold your paper the tall way if you'd like your castle to be tall. You can hold your paper sideways or horizontally if you want your castle to be longer. I like my castles to be nice and tall, so I'm going to hold my paper vertically or the tall way. And I started with the bottom and I put 3 blocks or 3 squares down at the bottom, and then I just started stacking them up on top of each other to kind of play around with the structure of my castle. Okay, so I'm liking the way that looks, but I feel like it needs a tower or something. So what I'm going to do is use this square. And this is when I said, remember when I said we can use these shapes to create other shapes? Well, this is what I mean. I want 2 skinny rectangles, but I have a square here, and I need 2 rectangles. But if I cut my square in half, then I have 2 small rectangles to work with. Perfect, I love that. Same thing with the circles. If you cut a circle in half, you get a half circle, or what looks like an arch. Okay, that's what I've done up here at the top. So if you need more shapes, look at the shapes that you have and see what shapes you can come up with out of those shapes. I think I'm going to cut the corners off of this one and make a triangle. So I'm going to start at one corner and just cut straight up, and then straight down. And there I have a triangle. Actually, I have 3 triangles now. Okay, so when you are, oh, I like that. So when you're building your castle, look at the shapes that you have and see what you can create, what new shapes you can create out of the shapes that you have on your pile. I'm gonna finish this and then I'll come right back. All right, I finished arranging all of my shapes, and I even still have some shapes left over that I could use a little bit later. I'll talk about that on day 3. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm gonna save my shapes for later, put them in a nice neat pile, and either put them in your folder, or if you're at home, put them in a safe place for you to be able to get to them next time you come to art. So what I'm going to do is just start gluing my shapes down the way I have it right here. All right, welcome back to Mary Blair Castles Day 3. This last day is Details Day. This is when you can add all kinds of other shapes and different types of lines to your castle to give it your own creative Mary Blair flair. Mary Blair didn't put a lot of details like people and animals in her castle paintings, but if you want to add 1 or 2 of those kinds of details, you may. If you'd rather leave those kinds of details out, that's okay too. You are the artist, so you get to decide. Now I have all these leftover shapes here, and I think I'm actually going to use these to add more colorful shape details right onto my castle. So let's see what I have here, what I can do. I am going to cut this square in half to make 2 yellow rectangles. And then I'm actually going to put them right on top of each other and cut them in half again so that I have 2 small squares. These would be great for windows. I think I'm also going to cut one of these circles or 2 of these circles and make some arches, because Mary Blair had a lot of colorful shapes right on top of her shapes. So that's what I'm going to try to do as well. If you don't have any leftover shapes, you don't have to do this part. It's okay. 1 there, 1 there to match. Ooh, that looks very nice. All right, so what I think I'm going to do now is use this rectangle I have here, this green rectangle, and cut it in half so that I have a smaller square that can go right there. Love it. So now what I'm going to do is glue these on, and I'll be right back. All right, I glued on my shapes, and I still have some extra shapes here that I don't need. So I have some choices here. I could give these away to a friend who might need some shapes. I could save them somewhere and use them for another project at another time, or you can put them in the recycler. That's up to you. I'm going to save these just in case I need them later on for some other project. So the last thing I'm going to do is add some shapes and lines to my castle. I'm not going to do too many shapes and lines because I don't want all my shapes and lines to take away from the beautiful, colorful shapes that I have on here already. So what I'm going to do is just pick a couple. Put some zigzag lines down here, some wiggly lines here, maybe some dash lines here. Maybe some wiggly lines here to match so that it has balance. happy with the way that looks, so I'm going to stop. Actually, just kidding. I'm going to add some more of these lines right around here. There we go. Now I'm happy with the way that it looks. All right, so what I'm going to do next is put my name on the back because I forgot to do that to start out. And there we go. There's my beautiful Mary Blair inspired castle.